Samus just collapsed into a pile of tears in front of a boss she's killed 6 or 7 times. I finally get it! I finally get the story Nintendo was going for with this game. Metroid Prime Hunters introduced us to Sylux, a hunter who uses stolen Federation technology and has a massive vendetta against the Federation and Samus in particular. The 100% ending of Metroid Prime 3 shows Sylux following Samus into hyperspace, observing and waiting for the chance to strike. Here's my hunch. Immediately after Super Metroid, when Samus was beaten up and exhausted, Sylux seized an opportunity to attack and captured her. He then sent an imposter Samus into the Federation so nobody would notice that she's gone. There have already been 2 species of shapeshifters introduced into the series, and one of the characters in Other M is an android so lifelike that nobody can tell the difference. It wouldn't have been that hard to find a replicant. Hell, maybe the Star Child at the start of the game is Sylux growing his own clone Samus. Makes as much sense as any other explanation you can pull out for that scene. Metroid Fusion showed us that the Federation can transfer people's brains into computers. Sylux could have copied Samus's memories into the clone. An incomplete or flawed transfer would explain why this fake Samus acts nothing like the real one. Maybe the imposter follows Adam's stupid-ass orders without question because it's afraid it's blowing its cover. In Other M, we're playing as the imposter while Sylux keeps the real Samus captive. That is the only explanation I will accept for this game because I don't care what you or Nintendo says. This is not Samus! According to series chronology, Samus has fought Ridley 6 times by this point. 7 if you fight him in Metroid 2, I haven't beaten that game yet. You fight and beat far more powerful versions of Ridley in Metroid Prime 1 and 3, and now Samus breaks down crying when she sees him, to the point that she has to be rescued by one of the Marines. Suck my morph balls! Some gamers who can't accept that there exists a bad Metroid game like to argue that Samus's massively out-of-character behavior is due to post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not even going to pretend to understand how PTSD works, but I don't buy this explanation, and I'll tell you why. Other M takes place after the Metroid Prime games, which means that Samus got through being trapped on dark ether with absolutely no escape as the planet explodes, being hunted by 6 bounty hunters at once, one of whom is an elite sniper that could kill her before she even knows he's there, falling down a miles-long shaft fighting a souped-up Ridley with absolutely no means of surviving the landing, and getting an infection that slowly overtakes her entire body until she's mutated to the point her gunship doesn't even recognize her anymore. This woman got through all that, didn't have PTSD in Super Metroid, got it for Metroid Other M, and then got over it again for Metroid Fusion, because when you fight Ridley in Metroid Fusion, Samus doesn't break down crying, she starts putting missiles through his eye! PTSD is not a 24-hour bug. Once you have it, you struggle with it for the rest of your life. So Samus has PTSD? I call bullshit! Another half-assed explanation that fans like to pull out of their ass is that Samus is just surprised to see Ridley, considering that he was allegedly killed off for real in Super Metroid. 1, after having killed him about 6 times, seeing him again is about as surprising as a Republican disagreeing with literally anything President Obama ever said. 2, surprise does not mean panic attack. 3, it's stated somewhere or other that the Ridley in Super Metroid is a clone, meaning it should be no surprise that there's at least one more Ridley still kicking around. And 4, yet another Ridley pops up in Metroid Fusion when the guy should be extra special dead. How come Samus doesn't freak out then? People also argue that Samus has this reaction to Ridley in some obscure and previously non-canon manga that was never released outside of Japan. And even if it were canon, the manga in which it does happen has Samus get over this exact problem. The argument that this is somehow in character for Samus just has no leg to stand on. Ridley kills Anthony, and Samus immediately gets over her little freakout, and the boss fight starts. Samus's breakdown is not a plot point. It is not relevant to the story in any remote way. This scene is 100% vestigial to the story, and let's be honest, we all know why this scene is in here. Metroid Other M was primarily developed by Team Ninja, a dev team that has made the new Ninja Gaiden games, Dead or Alive, and pretty much nothing else, aside from co-developing Hyrule Warriors. I've never played the new Ninja Gaidens, but a viewer of mine said he's played them, and the women in those games are basically pairs of breasts that need to be rescued and nothing else. As for Dead or Alive, I don't need to say anything, do I? Team Ninja seems to think that a strong, independent woman who doesn't need a man in her life to function is like a unicorn. They only exist in fairy tales and My Little Pony. Samus's freakout is in here because Team Ninja couldn't live with themselves unless gaming's greatest female protagonist was rescued by a male character to firmly establish how the world works. It's entirely possible that I'm misblaming Team Ninja, but you can't deny this is kinda suspicious. Also, even when talking about the death of Anthony, a longtime friend, Samus's voice still never breaks an octave.
Unbearable thoughts welled up in me.
I am acting. Metroid Other M gets significantly easier the further that you get into the game. There are 3 kinds of enemies in the game. Cannon fodder, the basic enemies that populate hallways and can be killed in one shot. Space pirates, soldiers that take a decent amount of damage to take down and you encounter in small groups. And mini-bosses, special enemies that you encounter like clockwork in every single large room. Pirates and mini-bosses aren't even mildly annoyed by your basic beam, forcing you to fight them with missiles and charge beams. But once you get the wave beam, and even more so when you get the plasma beam, your basic beam becomes powerful enough to take down pirates and mini-bosses with minimal effort. And at the end of the game, when you unlock power bombs, forget it. Everything that isn't the final boss dies in one hit. In other Metroid games, new and stronger enemies get introduced so that your powers prevent you from becoming God. Otherwise, the enemies are just treated more as obstacles rather than enemies that you have to kill to proceed like they are in this game. In Other M, basically all of the enemies have the exact same power level. Instead of moving up from fighting Raditz to Nappas to Vegetas, you fight legions of Raditz with gradually better weapons, and the game never evolves. Once you get to Ridley, the game is pretty much over, because the rest of the game is you walking between cutscenes. You beat the crap out of Ridley and he runs away before you can kill him. Samus loses contact with Adam and decides to pay him a visit, before spotting an anonymous Marine and following him to Sector 1. Samus eventually needs to cross a gap, and since she doesn't have Adam to authorize it anyway, activates the space jump and screw attack on her own. I'm sure I'm supposed to be happy that Samus is finally using her own equipment without Adam's permission, but I'm busier wondering why Adam felt the need to ban the ability to jump repeatedly. Did he think a survivor would sprout out of the ground and I'd land on them? Also, not to beat a dead horse, but the monster that you chased down through half the game was Ridley before he finished evolving. If Adam had authorized my full arsenal right away, I'd have been able to kill Ridley during our first encounter, and none of this shit would have happened. You run into the blonde lady from earlier, and she claims to be Madeline Bergman, and then you're treated to a cutscene that is exactly 10 minutes long! For reasons the game never even attempts to explain, the Federation decided to build a Special Forces unit built out of bioweapons, a team modeled after the Space Pirates. However, the pirates they were building all went berserk after the cloned Ridley grew up. She also reveals that the Federation began growing Metroids and Ridley using the guts they cleaned off of Samus' suit at the start of the game. They built an AI called MB to control the Metroids the way Mother Brain used to, but MB became self-aware somehow, and that's when shit hit the fan all over the base. The Federation didn't just nuke the battleship from orbit because they want to retrieve the Metroids and then nuke the battleship from orbit. And to top off this expositional onslaught, she reveals that Adam was involved with the battleship project all along! Yeah, in case you couldn't tell from the fact that she's grinning like a sociopath the entire time she's talking, this bitch is lying her skinny white ass off. Was that supposed to be a twist for later? Also, has anybody else noticed that this game has, like, no story to it until the last 2 hours? Am I the only one? I've got some major problems with this cutscene. First off, about half of it is Samus repeating shit we already know, or questioning things that get explained a minute later. Why does the Federation seem to think that Metroids are the best weapon in the universe worth breaking gallons of laws to obtain? They can be killed by freezing weapons, and if the perpetually under-equipped Marines have freezing weapons, I'm guessing everybody else in the universe has them too. These things aren't exactly missile boats, you know what I'm saying? Also, the game comes up with 2 separate reasons for why the monsters throughout the base went berserk. MB is commanding the Metroids, and Ridley is commanding everything else. But early in the game, you run into this weird bird-mouse thingy, and the game decides to pull a bullshit ex machina and say that bird thing was Ridley before it evolved Pokemon style. But if all of the creatures all went berserk because of Ridley, and Ridley wasn't hatched until a third of the way through the game,
you've created a time paradox.
This makes so little sense that the game actually retcons it later so that MB is controlling the Metroids and the Space Pirates. This entire cutscene reads like it was written in the 5 minutes before lunch break and then nobody proofread it. Samus deduces that the Federation was going to retrieve the Metroids and then blow up the ship, but Adam showed up and screwed up their plans, so instead they installed the Deleter on Adam's team. So they didn't put the Deleter on Adam's team until after he showed up at the base, but it would have been physically impossible to add a member to Adam's team unless they did it before he reached the base, because you can't add a member to the team after the team has already arrived, but they didn't know they needed a Deleter until after Adam arrived. Yeah!
You've created a time paradox.
Samus figures out that the Federation snuck the deleter onto Adam's team because he was going to the bottle ship and was going to find out a bunch of illegal shit. But if Adam is in on the project and covering up the conspiracy, then the deleter wouldn't be here, because Adam would already have been covering up the shit the deleter was sent to cover up. And if Adam was sent here to kill survivors, then why did Adam forbid Samus from using her gear? Because he was worried she might kill survivors! And yeah, I know that Adam isn't really evil because this girl could only be more obviously lying if her nose extended about 3 feet. That's not the point. The point is that Samus buys this shit instantly, despite the fact that she has previously had enough faith in Adam to run through volcanic rooms unprotected, and the fact that this girl's story has more holes in it than squished cheese that's been used for target practice. She buys it because the plot says Samus turns on Adam now. Also, if Samus has resigned herself to the fact that Adam is a traitor, why doesn't she immediately activate all of her gear that she only wasn't using because Adam told her to? I also had an epiphany where I realized something really weird about this game. Metroid has always been kind of inspired by the Alien film franchise, and Other M took that inspiration a few steps too far. The monster starts out tiny but molds into a fearsome beast. That's a reference to the first Alien movie. One of the good guys is a traitor and the supposed good guys want to weaponize the monsters, both plot points from Aliens. Hell, Marines get called to an abandoned outpost overrun by unknown creatures, protagonist finds and bonds with a young survivor, female protagonist is roped in with a group of Marines and treated as an outsider, fighting an enemy she alone knows better than anyone. This entire story is basically a first draft of Aliens with Microsoft Word's Find and Replace function applied to it. Aside from the icers, the Marines' weapons look just like the pulse rifle and smart gun from Aliens, and this is a stretch, but you could also argue the plot point about cloning the Metroids off of Samus is a reference to Alien Resurrection. Not exactly a problem, all things considered, but it's just something I wanted to call out. Samus heads to Sector 0, and you run smack into another 10-minute cutscene. Samus encounters a baby Metroid, then hesitates to kill it as she reflects upon the first time she met the infant Metroid from the earlier games. We'll open that can of worms later. Samus gets ready to blow the Metroid to Kingdom Come when suddenly she gets shot so hard her suit malfunctions. The Metroid gets ready to attack Samus when it gets shot too, and we see Samus' attacker is Adam! One might ask why Adam would shoot Samus in the back in order to try and save her from a Metroid when he had a clear shot at the Metroid and Samus was just about to shoot it herself. That's a very good question. So Adam tells Samus that the Metroids in Sector 0 can't be frozen, which has always been the Metroid's primary weakness. He has absolutely zero proof to back this up, by the way. Adam then comes to the conclusion that the only way to kill the Metroids is to trigger the self-destruct mechanism of Sector 0 and wipe them all out at once. You know, Metroids are not from the planet Krypton. They are not immune to everything except one thing. In Metroid 2, you can kill fully grown Metroids quite easily with nothing but missiles, and in Metroid Prime, you can kill mutated and much more powerful Metroids in one shot with power bombs. Plus, my plasma beam slash wave beam slash ice beam can carve through most monsters like a knife through a Dexter victim. I should be able to clear out these Metroids with zero problems. Metroids are not as powerful as the story builds them up to be. I'm sorry, they're just not. Also, Adam is certain the Metroids are immune to freezing weapons, so he attacks the Metroid that's about to kill Samus with a freezing weapon. Also, Adam's Icer somehow deals enough damage to Samus to dissolve her power suit, implying that it's a one-hit kill on her, which absolutely nothing else in the game is. Samus asks Adam why he's listed as the head of the Metroid project. Adam says the Federation asked for his sign-off on a Metroid bioweapons project, and Adam wrote a huge essay explaining what a bad idea it was. A small rogue Federation group co-opted the essay for this project, and that makes even less sense. They co-opted an essay explaining what a horrible idea the project was as head of the project. That'd be like co-opting my Superman 64 review as the head of the sequel. Sector 0 has a self-destruct mechanism that triggers if there's a huge explosion in the sector. Adam decides to head right into the sector and sacrifice himself to detach the sector. Don't get me wrong, I love the idea of Adam dying painfully, but there are easier ways to cause an explosion to detach the sector. 1. Have Samus roll 2 feet inside, deploy a power bomb, and then immediately leave before the sector detaches. 2. Go back to your ship, which probably has some decent artillery, and nuke the sector from the outside to trigger the auto-destruct. 3. Adam's gun looks like it has a grenade launcher. How about he and Samus huck grenades and super missiles through the doorway to trigger the auto-destruct without setting foot inside? To the last, Adam is an idiot.
Samus, I wish I could battle Ridley, but I can't. Unlike you, I'm no galactic savior.
What?
Unlike you, I'm no galactic savior.
What are you doing here? That information is not for an outsider.
You don't move unless I say so, and you don't fire until I say so.
Are you freaking kidding me? Adam has been treating Samus like shit from the beginning of the game. You don't get to sweep all that under the rug with one line and try to make Adam look like a decent guy. You know, it's really clear that the developers had no idea just how abusive Adam is depicted in this game, because otherwise the moral of this game would be your abusive spouse really does care about you, so shut up and deal with their shit. Adam tells you the bottle ship is on a collision course for Federation headquarters, he found a survivor on the ship, and he wants you to kill Ridley. Then the moment we've all been waiting for, Adam sacrifices himself to kill all of the Metroids. I know this is supposed to be a really sad moment, but after all the crap this guy's put me through, he has my permission to die. I'm sorry, I've been waiting for Adam to kick the bucket for a long time, so I'm going to enjoy this moment and see how many references I can make during his death scene.
I'm fed up with this world.
Oh, I'm dead. Increasing the drama of the story.
When you see your bro in hell, tell him he's still a douche!
Sometimes I wonder if all this will just end with one of us looking down at the other's corpse, trying to work out what to do next.
Load the spaceship with the rocket fuel! Load it with the worst!
If you had super hearing, any second you'd hear the pop.
Boom! Like happy festival fireworks, yeah?
Oh my god! He blew into more pieces than Yamcha!
Oh, they're going to have to glue you back together in hell!
You okay, lady?
I'm just gonna sit here quietly and let my life flash before my eyes. That went really quick. Let me try it again.